He settled into seat 12F, exhausted and invisible, just another face in a crowded airplane. A poor single dad, juggling bills, sleepless nights, and the constant weight of responsibility. He hoped for nothing more than a quiet flight to clear his mind. But as the cabin crew walked past him, offering smiles and service to everyone else, he felt that familiar sting of being overlooked. No one noticed the quiet hero sitting there until a single moment changed everything. As the engines roared and the plane climbed through the clouds, he reached for his tray, only to hear a sharp voice over the intercom calling his name, his call sign. The announcement wasn't just routine. It carried weight, a recognition he never expected. Somewhere high above, F-22 pilots, elite guardians of the sky, had heard it, and then, in a breathtaking instant, they saluted. Passengers glanced around, confused, some whispering, others staring, sensing something extraordinary unfolding. How could anyone know this man's story? What secret did his call sign hold? The single dad, unaware of the powerful connection he had just triggered, felt a strange mix of awe and anxiety. His ordinary flight had suddenly become extraordinary, and every eye in the cabin seemed to hold a question. Who was this man, and why did the pilots salute him? Little did he know, this moment was just the beginning. What followed would reveal courage, honor, and a story no one aboard would ever forget, but the answers weren't coming yet. The man sank lower into his seat, heart racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He was just a single dad, hardly someone who commanded attention, let alone a salute from F-22 pilots. His mind flashed back to years of struggle, long hours at work, nights spent rocking his daughter to sleep, living paycheck to paycheck, and never asking for help. Every challenge had shaped him into someone quietly resilient, someone the world rarely noticed. But the call sign? It wasn't random. It carried history, a legacy he had never thought would matter again. Years ago, he had served, not in grand parades or headlines, but in missions that tested him in ways most people couldn't imagine. That old life felt distant now, buried under diapers, bills, and school pickups, but somehow, someone in the sky remembered. Around him, whispers began to ripple through the cabin. A few passengers exchanged curious glances, sensing the tension without understanding it. Flight attendants hovered awkwardly, unsure what protocol to follow. And somewhere in the cockpit, the F-22 pilots maintained a silent watch, their salute a quiet code, a mark of respect that only those in the know could decode. The dad gripped his armrest, torn between pride and fear. Was he about to be recognized or exposed? The plane continued its steady climb, clouds blurring past the windows, but inside, time seemed suspended. Something significant was unfolding, and he could feel it in every nerve. The story of a quiet, struggling father was about to intersect with forces far bigger than his everyday life. But what that intersection would bring, no one on board could predict. The flight settled into a steady rhythm, but the air around seat 12F felt anything but calm. The single dad couldn't shake the feeling that every eye in the cabin was on him, even if most passengers didn't know why. His daughter, curled up with a small tablet, sensed his unease and nudged his arm, her innocent question hanging in the air. "Daddy, are they looking at us?" He forced a smile, hiding the storm of thoughts racing through his mind. In the cockpit, the F-22 pilots maintained a strict focus on the skies, but their minds flickered back to the call sign, a name etched in their memory from missions long past. It was a signal, a thread linking the past and present, a silent acknowledgement of service and courage that few outside the military world could understand. That recognition, however, came with consequences. They had seen what loyalty could demand, and they knew this moment could set off a chain reaction. Meanwhile, in the cabin, other passengers whispered theories. Some speculated it was a celebrity, others a secret agent. None realized the truth. The man's life had been ordinary for years, but his past carried weight that could ripple far beyond this flight. A flight attendant, curious and cautious, checked in on him again, her polite questions brushing against his nerves. As the plane cruised above the clouds, tension tightened like a coiled spring. Every glance, every subtle gesture in the cabin hinted at the invisible web of attention surrounding him. Somewhere above, in the silent expanse of the sky, forces he didn't even understand were converging. The dad realized this flight wasn't just a trip. It was the beginning of a story that could change everything he thought he knew about his life, his past, and the power of a single call sign. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, rattling the cabin and snapping everyone's attention to the windows and overhead bins. But for the single dad in seat 12F, the shaking felt insignificant compared to the storm brewing inside him. His pulse raced as he caught a glimpse of the cockpit door swinging slightly, a subtle movement that sent a shiver down his spine. The F-22 pilots weren't just acknowledging him, they were waiting, watching, calculating. Whispers grew louder among the passengers. Phones discreetly lifted to capture glimpses of the unusual tension. Flight attendants moved cautiously, exchanging hurried glances, aware that this was no ordinary flight. Somewhere in the distance, a faint but unmistakable sound of high-powered jets slicing through the clouds sent ripples of awe and fear through the cabin. The dad gripped his daughter's hand, trying to mask the anxiety that threatened to show on his face. Memories surged, unbidden long nights of training. Missions he had thought buried, the code names and call signs that once defined his life. Now, decades later, those echoes had returned, bringing him face to face with forces and people from a world he had left behind. Each second stretched painfully, every look from the crew, every subtle gesture from fellow passengers, building an invisible tension that no one could explain. Then, a sudden announcement over the intercom froze the room. The pilot's voice was calm, but the words carried weight no one could ignore. Something was about to happen, something that could change everything for him and everyone on board. The single dad's stomach twisted as he realized there was no turning back. His ordinary flight had become a stage for extraordinary events, and the climax was closing in faster than the plane slicing through the clouds. Just as the dad tried to steady his breathing, the plane's intercom crackled again, this time with a voice that made every passenger freeze. "We have eyes on seat 1-F, confirming identity." The words were calm but carried a chilling precision, as if the speaker knew far more than anyone should about a man quietly clutching his daughter's hand. Panic and curiosity rippled through the cabin, but he couldn't move, couldn't speak. His heart pounded in sync with the engines, each beat a reminder that his life had suddenly become a public stage. He stole a glance at the window and, far above, the blur of F-22 jets streaked across the sky, closer than they had been before. Their presence wasn't just symbolic anymore. It felt deliberate, almost predatory. Then came a murmur from a nearby passenger. "That call sign? It's military. You don't just hear that on a commercial flight." The dad's stomach dropped. All the years he'd tried to live quietly, to be just a regular father, now collided with the inescapable truth of his past. Suddenly, a second twist emerged. A woman in the row behind him leaned forward, her eyes sharp and calculating. She whispered something only he could hear. "They're not here for you. At least, not all of them." Confusion, fear, and suspicion crashed through him. Who was watching him? Who was after him? And why had his call sign drawn attention from forces he couldn't fully see? Every passenger was now unknowingly entangled in a story far bigger than a simple flight. The stakes had escalated, and the single dad realized that the next moments could either protect or expose everything he had fought to keep safe. The sky outside was calm, but inside, the tension had become almost unbearable. The cabin fell into a tense silence as the plane leveled off, every passenger holding their breath without fully knowing why. The single dad felt the weight of countless eyes on him, the realization of his past colliding with the fragile life he had built. Then, without warning, the cockpit door opened and a uniformed officer stepped in. Calm but authoritative, he approached seat 12F. "Mr. Lawson," he said. The name jolted the dad. It was the first time in decades anyone had called him by the identity tied to his old life in covert operations. "Your service saved lives you'll never know," the officer continued. "And today, it's saving another." Confusion flooded the dad's mind, but he didn't have time to process. Outside, the roar of the F-22s grew louder, and then one of the pilot's voices came clearly over the cabin intercom. "All clear. Threat neutralized." Passengers looked at each other in bewilderment as the tension finally began to release. What had seemed like a mysterious show of military recognition was actually a covert intervention. The dad's presence on the flight had been critical to preventing a potential security threat. Relief, awe, and disbelief washed over him as the officer explained the situation in measured tones, confirming that the salute had been a signal of respect and confirmation that everything was now under control. Just as he exhaled, thinking the ordeal was over, the woman from behind leaned forward again. "You've done your part, but there's one more person waiting for you," she